Hello everybody, welcome to Weekly Tech. How are you all? In this video, we will cover most useful JavaScript interview questions that most of the interviewers ask that I generally prefer asking when I take interviews related to JavaScript. This video will gonna be a bit longer as compared to my other videos. So you can grab a cup of tea or coffee, but please stick to the video because I have covered questions which are basic level, intermediate level and advanced level. We'll start with basic level and then we'll shift to intermediate level questions and then we'll gradually shift to advanced level questions. So most of the questions are designed by me, but a few of them you can find it over internet on different articles and blogs. So the core idea behind this video is to show you the different interview questions that interviewers generally ask, and I have covered topics such as objects, arrays, type conversion, strict mode, switch case, set timeout, spread operators, and many more. So the total number of questions will be in between 35 to 50, and I think these number of questions are sufficient enough to give you an idea. So let's start with our first question, that is, what is hoisting in JavaScript? Hoisting is a default behavior of JavaScript where all the variable and functions are moved on the top. This means that irrespective of where the variables and functions are declared, they are moved on the top of the scope. The scope can be both local and global. So give you an example. Let's say I have declared a variable hoisted variable equal to 33 and I did a console.log of this hoisted variable. And let me show it to you in Chrome. So I'll open the console, and if I declare it like this, I have declared the hoisted variable after the console.log and I am assigning a value before console.log. So when I console.log the variable, I still get the value 33, and that is because of hoisting. So as I said, the variables and functions that are declared are moved on the top of the scope. The scope can be both local and global, and by this I mean let me create a function, do something, parameters I don't need it right now, and I'll do x equal to 33 console.log x, and I'll declare where x equal to and where x, okay, and then I call do something. What do you think, what will be the output? As we discussed, so in JavaScript the variables will be hoisted on the top of their scope. The scope can be local and global. So the variables declared by where are either global scoped or function scoped. Block scope is not there on where, it is available in let and const. So in this case the variable x will be function scoped. So again the hoisting will come into the picture, and when I call this function I'll get the correct output, x equal to 33, okay, irrespective whether I declared it or not before using it. If I do like this, so what do you think, what will be the output now? Variables are hoisted, but when they are hoisted, they by default get a value of undefined. So when you do undefined plus plus, you will get not a number. Okay, so keep this in mind. We'll have a couple of other interview questions on this. So please note, variables initialized are not hoisted, only variable declared are hoisted. So by this I mean, let me comment this out and let me declare a variable where x for now, okay, and I want to show you the value of x, and now I'm assigning a value to it. Please note the difference, okay. I assigned the value 33 to this variable. I have not declared it. I declared it after using the console.log. It worked because of the hoisting. But when I declare the variable and now I am initializing the variable with a value of 33, so what do you think, what will be the output here? It's undefined, because hoisting will move the values on the top, the variables on the top according to their scope. It can be either global scope or function scope, but variables initialized are not hoisted. Let's move on to our next interview question, that is strict mode. So what is strict mode in JavaScript? So strict mode was a new feature in ECMAScript 5 that allows you to place a program or a function in a strict operating context. So you can avoid hoisting when you are in strict mode. You cannot use some keywords to declare the variables. In keyword they are reserved. So you can avoid hoisting in JavaScript by if you are in the strict mode. So how strict mode will work, you can use this keyword, use strict. So just the way we did it before, we initialized a variable, hoisted variable, and then we console logged it, and then we declared it. But this thing is not available in strict mode. So hoisting is not there in strict mode. So if you do a x equal to 23, you will get an error that x is not defined. But if you remove strict mode and when you run it, no error, nothing will happen. Okay, so to avoid hoisting, you can use strict mode. Okay, so the next one in the series is question number 3. Explain implicit type coercion in JavaScript. So what is type conversion and type coercion in JavaScript? So type conversion is converting an integer type to a string type, or a string type to an integer type. So for example, I have this variable, let's say first name, and in first name I have value 23 in string. Okay, now I want to convert first name to an integer type, number first name. So I'll get a number in the output, and this 23 will be converted from string to integer if I use number function. Okay, so I'll get 23, which is of type number. What is this? This is type conversion. So you can convert from one type to another. So this is not applicable to exact strings. So let's say if I have first name like Uday here, so Uday as a string is not a number. When I am trying to convert Uday into a number, I'll get not a number in the output. Okay, so I'll get NaN in the output, because you cannot convert exactly a string to a number, because Uday is a string. So but when you have a number sitting as a string, like 23 is a number, but right now it's sitting as a string, you can convert it. But when you have Uday a string, you'll get NaN in the output, which is of type number. So the type of NaN is number. So that's why you are getting, when you are doing type of number first name, you're getting number as a type, but the output is NaN, that is not a number. So this is type conversion. You can convert from one type to another. What is type coercion is, so for an example, if I do console.log 2 plus 2 is in string and now 2 is in number. So what do you think, what will be the output? It's 22, and the type will be of string. Okay, type of, so this 22 will be in string. Now I need to put it in whole brackets. Now the output will be string. When a number is added to a string, the number type is always converted to a string type. So when you are adding a number to a string, let me give another example. When you are adding number to a string, it will be converted to a string. The cross operator, when we use to add two numbers, the output will be a number. Okay, so when you do a 22 plus 44 will be a number, but if there is a string involved in between the addition, you will always get a string in the output. Okay, so like 22 plus 44, the addition will be a number. Now number plus a string will be a string. Okay, so the plus all operator will always coerce as a string in the output, but on the same hand, the minus operator will do exactly the opposite. If you have 3 minus in a string, 3 minus 3, so this won't coerce into a string type. It will always give you a number in the output that you can easily cross check by using type of and the operation, and it will be number. So I have created a detailed video on type conversion and type coercion. The link is there in the description. If you want to know more about it, you can check out the description. And whatever questions that I'm going to cover in this video, I have covered almost all of them in separate videos where I have done an in-depth analysis, and I have explained you with some use cases that we use in real life production. So this is type conversion and type coercion for you. So the plus operator will coerce into a string, and the minus operator will coerce it into a number. And this coercion is not specific to JavaScript. This is with all the programming language. To explain it, I have an if condition, let's say, and if I do 2 is equal to 2, then do something in the if block. So we are comparing 2 equal to 2, but the output is boolean. So this is type coercion here. Okay, the result of an operation is converted to a different type. When I'm doing a 2 equal to 2, the return type will be boolean. So if only expects two values, truthy and falsy. So true is a truthy value and false is a falsy value. If I do a 0 here, it will be a falsy value. Okay, so if I do if 0, then this if block won't execute. Okay, in if I won't get the value in if, and if I do 2 equal to 2, the output will be a boolean true and I'll be in if. Okay, so this type coercion is in every programming language. This is not specific to JavaScript. And as I said, if accepts only two values, truthy and falsy values. So a few of the truthy values, a few of the falsy values are false, 0, -0, an empty string, null, undefined, and not a number. And I have covered all of them in type coercion and type conversion video. The link is in the description. You can check that. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. That is, what is the difference between equal to and triple equal to operator? Okay, that I think we have checked. So if I do a string equal to 2, so this triple equal to will not only check the value but will also check the type, and in this case it won't work. The if condition will not execute whatever we write inside the if block. But if I do a single equal to, it will only check the value, not the type. The next question is, what is immediately invocable function expressions in JavaScript, or that we have called ifs? So when you generally define a function, or when you generally declare a function, you do it like this: function keyword and then the name of the function. So for the demo purpose, I kept it like myfunc, and I don't need a parameter here. And inside the block, I will simply do I am not a if. Okay, for now. And to call that function, you will simply use myfunc, the name of the function, followed by a parenthesis. Okay, this is the way you call a function, right? Everyone knows it. And whatever the code that you return inside this curly braces will get executed when you call the function. When you declare a ify, you need to declare it inside the parenthesis first, the function itself. So the function followed by the function name. I don't need a parenthesis right now. Sorry, I don't need a parameter right now. And inside console.log, I will do I am a ify. Okay, and to call this function, I need to use another parenthesis. So this is the syntax or the body of ify, and when I run it, as per the definition, it will be the ify function will run as soon as it is defined. Okay, so the main thing that we need to consider, or the things that should be keep in mind related to ifs are, it will be executed as soon as it is defined. And to pass the parameter, you need to use the second parenthesis to pass the parameter. So for an example, if I declare equal to sing, and I will use the parameter name as name, and I will pass the last name to the parameter like this, and there I can simply log the name. Okay, to check whether the parameter is received or not. And I got an error because the semicolon is missing from here, and now I think it should work. Okay, I am a ify and sing. Okay, so the first thing that one should keep in mind related with ify is to pass the parameter, you need to do it like this. And the second one is this keyword, the value of this. So the value of this will be in case of ify will be fetched from this lexical scope. So keep this in mind. Okay, so we'll have more questions on this. So two things you should keep in mind right now. There's x plus plus. Okay, when the variable is not declared, you are post incrementing it. So you are post incrementing the undefined, so it will give you not a number in the output, and that this keyword inside the ify, so it will share the lexical scope. Okay, that this keyword will have. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question, and please don't worry about the code. I will share the code in the link will be in the description, so don't worry about that. So let me comment out everything just for the sake of not to get in trouble. And the next question will be what is this? Okay, so we were discussing about this, and the next question is this. So this is a keyword which refers to the object that the function is a property of, and I have created a detailed video on this. The link is obviously in the description. So the this keyword refers to the object that the function is a property of. The value of this keyword will always depends on the object that is invoking the function. So for an example, if I have let my details equal to an object, and inside that object I have first name as Uday, and I have a function inside this which will be print name, and inside print name I have console.log this dot first name. Okay, so when I call print name from object my details dot print name, so the this keyword, as per the definition, the value of this keyword will always depends on the object that is invoking the function. So in this case, the print name is been invoked by the my details object, so the output will be this dot first name will be Uday. Okay, so I can do it like this also. Print name local equal to my details and print name. So I will copy the the print name function of my details object to a different function which will be print name local, and when I call print name local I'll get a different output which will be undefined, because we are calling the print name without any object. So that this will refer to the window object, and in window object there is no keyword defined as, or there is no property defined as the first name. Okay, so if I define the first name in window object, it will work. So window dot first name equal to Uday. So same. Okay, so now this will work, because this keyword is the value of the this keyword keeps changing according to the way we are calling the function. So in this case we are calling it without any object, so this will refer to the global object or the window object. In Node.js it will be different, it depends on the module to module, and in case of the browser it will be the window object. And when we have assigned a property first name to the window object, Uday Singh, it will be available to this keyword of print name local. And when we have called the same function with the object my details, it will hold the value from the my details object. And I have covered it in detail in the separate video, and the link is in the description, so you can check that out. Okay, so let's move on to our next question, which is what is call, apply and bind method. So call, apply and bind methods are used to change the this keyword or the value of the this keyword in a function. So for an example, if I have a function like this function print parameter, and the parameter will be, let's say, the name, and in the name I'll do console.log this dot name. Okay, and I don't need the name first name. Okay, and I don't need the name in parameter. So whenever I call this print parameter function, print pam, it will take the first name from the this value, from the this keyword, and print it out. Okay, so when I call it like this, so now in this condition, normal function call non-strict mode will refer to the global object, that is the window object, and in window object we don't have a first name defined, so we'll get an output of undefined. Okay, to change the value of this we'll use the call, apply and bind methods. So the first one will be call, and the call method will allow you to pass an object. So for example, if I have an object, let obj equal to an object which is having a property first name, and I want to use this first name in my print parameter function, so I can use call method. So in our case this argument will be the object itself, whose property I want to use inside the print pam function by using this dot first name, and then the arguments of the function that is actually required. So in this case, let's say I have a second argument, or the argument of the function is second name or last name, and I will simply use it here, last name, from the parameter. and the first argument will be this argument, that is the object itself, and the second will be the last name, that is the actual parameter of the function. And in this case I can use Singh here. Okay, so when I call it, I'll get Uday Singh in the output. So this dot first name is actually coming from this object, and instead of passing the arguments as a comma separated value, we can pass it inside an array. So we can do the same thing with apply. So for that, to explain it more, let me have a last name and a middle name, and I will do plus middle name plus last name. Okay, so and let me use call again. So the middle name will be, let's say, Kumar, and I'll get Uday Kumar Singh in the output. Okay, but if your function is having a lot of arguments, then call will be a bit weird in calling, because it will be a comma separated values of a lot of arguments. So to avoid that thing, we can use apply. So print param dot apply followed by the object, the this keyword, the this value, and these things, the parameters will be inside in the array. So this will save you in passing a lot of parameters, and you can simply use an array to pass rest of the parameters. Okay, and the same thing will be printed in the output. So call and apply, both of them are changing the this keyword of the function. But if you notice one thing, when you do use call and apply, the function will get called immediately. So what about if you don't want to call the function immediately and you want to call it later, but you want to define the this value right now? Okay, so in this case you can use the bind method. So bind method will return a new parameter, or sorry, a new function. So let me capture that new function into a different function. Let's say print name Uday, and now I'll use print param dot bind, and I want to bind it with the object. And now whenever I call print name Uday, so now I need to give the rest of the arguments, that are the Kumar and Singh, that is expected by the original function in the arguments, and I'll get the same output. Okay, so with call, apply and bind methods we are getting the same output, but bind method will allow you to use the function at a later point of the time. Okay, so the next one is, what is currying in JavaScript? So currying is an advanced technique to transform a function of arguments n. So if there is a function which takes n argument, so it's a technique to transform function of arguments n to n functions of one or less argument. Let me explain it with an example. So let's say I have a function add, and it takes an argument a, and it will return another function which takes an argument b, and it will return a plus b. Okay, so when I call this add like this with, let's say, 3, I'll get a function in return. Okay, so when I call this add, so let me console log it. If you see, I'll get a function in output. Okay, so now I want to call the function which is returned from this add function. So how to call a function? We can use this parenthesis, and then we will pass 4 here. Okay, so 3 plus 4 will be 7, so we'll get 7 in the output. So this is function currying. Okay, so let us understand it with another example, and it will take 2 arguments, 1 comma b, and it will return a into b. Okay, as simple as it sounds. And when I call multiply with 2 and 3, and I console the output, and let me comment this console, and I'll get 6 in the output. 2 into 3 is 6. So as we discussed, currying is an advanced technique of transforming a function with arguments n to n functions which can have one or less argument. Okay, so we'll transform this multiply. So we'll say function, the name will be currying, and I'll have an argument which is nothing but the function itself. Okay, please hold on, I'll explain everything. So, and I'll return a function which will have an argument a, and inside the return function I'll return another function which will have the argument b, and inside this I will use this function fn, the one which you are getting in the argument of our outer function, and then I'll say a comma b. Okay, so I'll call let curried multiply equal to currying, and I'll pass the function name multiply here. Okay, I'm not calling, I'm just passing the function name here. So what will happen, so we are calling currying function here, and in the argument I have passed the function name. So when I call it, I'll get a function in return, so I'll get this function in return. So let me console log it to prove it, and I'll get this function in return. Okay, so now what can I do with this function? One argument, that is a, so I'll pass a here, a to this, and it will return another function which is this function. Okay, and now I can call the return function again with another argument 3, and it will call the fn. Fn is nothing but our multiply function with the arguments a and b, which is nothing but 2 and 3, and we'll get the multiplication of 2 and 3 in the output, that is 6. Okay, so this is function currying for you. So it's an advanced technique by which we can transform a normal function with arguments n to n different functions which can have one or less than one argument. Okay, so now let's move on to our next question, which is explain scope and scope chain in JavaScript. So for now let me just comment it out, so we'll have a clear console. So the next question is, what is scope and scope chain in JavaScript? So scope in JavaScript determines the accessibility of variables and functions at various parts in our code. Okay, so if you put a cursor here and say what's the scope, so scope tell us which variables and functions are accessible at this moment. Okay, so there are basically three kind of scopes: global scope, local or function scope, and block scope. So let's have an example of the global scope. So I'll say, so now I'll use var because I want to explain you the difference between block scope and function scope. So var global variable, and the name will be hello. Okay, and then I'll have a function which we say wish, and wish will take no arguments, but it will take the global variable and say okay, I'll call wish, and I'll get hello world in the output. So this global variable is global, so this variable is accessible to all the functions. So variables and functions declared in the global namespace have global scope. So this global variable, I have declared it in global namespace, so it will have a global scope. So which means all the variables and functions having global scope can be accessed from anywhere inside the code. Okay, so now let's move on to our next scope, which is the function scope. So function where variables are always function scoped, it can either be global scoped or function scoped. So in this case we have declared the global variable by using the var keyword, and now we'll declare another variable inside a function. Let's say send message, and I'll say var, I'll declare the same name here. Okay, and I'll say hello world, console log the global variable, and I'll call the send message function. So what do you think, what will be the output here? So will it consider this global variable or the global variable which is really global? So let me comment out this function call. Let's see the output. And it took the global variable which is inside the function. Okay, it didn't even consider the global scope. Okay, so if I change the name from or the value from hello world to let's say something else over there, so I'll get the same output. JavaScript engine won't even consider checking it in the global scope if the variable is present in the function scope, and that is scope chain for you, and I'll explain it in detail after just few minutes. Let me give you another example of function scope. So global scope is nothing but variables and functions that are declared in the global namespace have global scope, and variables and functions that are declared inside a function have a local or a function scope, which means that all the variables and functions declared inside a function can be accessed from within the function and not outside of it. Okay, so if I declare another variable here, var local var, and I give it a name of value of sing, so this local var will be accessible inside the function send message but not outside the send message. Okay, so if I do a local var here, so I'll get an reference error that local var is not defined, because it's not defined in the global scope, it is defined in the function scope. Okay, so var, note one point here, so var keyword, so the variables declared with the var are only global scoped and function scoped, they are not block scoped. So by block I mean, let me comment out this function call, this console log also. So to explain block scope, let me declare another variable by using the let keyword. I'll say last name and I'll rename it to first name. Okay, so first name will be accessible and the last name also will be accessible inside the send message function only, not outside the scope of the function that we have already seen. And now if I print both of them, I'll get Uday Singh in the output. Okay, so the first name is var and the last name is declared by using the let keyword. Now if I put both of them in a block like this, so what do you think, what will be the output now? Last name is not defined. As we have seen and discussed that var keywords, variables declared by var keyword are limited to only function scope. That means they are not block scope, but let and const are block scope. So we have declared this last name inside this block only, so it is accessible inside this block only. So if I move this console log inside these two curly braces inside this block, then I'll get the correct output, because last name is accessible only in this block, not outside this block. Okay, but the same is not applicable to var. Var is only limited to function scope. That means it is accessible inside anywhere in the function, but this is not the case with let and const. They are block scoped, so that means they are accessible in their own block. Okay, so if I remove this console log from here, from this block, to by block I mean the code which is written inside these two curly braces. So these two curly braces is totally different from these two curly braces, so the code written inside this block and this block is completely different. By different I mean the scope is completely different. So this is a different block scope and this is a different block scope, but as var is only limited to function scope, the block scope is not available to var. So it's redundant in case of var, but for let it will work. So I'll get an error here as last name is not defined, because last name is a part of a different block. Okay, so keep this in mind, because we will gonna have a lot of question on this block scope and function scope. So now let's talk about the scope chain. So JavaScript will try to find a function or a variable first in its own scope, and then it will try to find it in the outer scopes. For an example, if I have declared last name in this scope, and if I have declared last name in function scope, let last name equal to Alice, and if I have declared last name globally, Bob. So when I call this console and use the last name, JavaScript engine will try to find out last name in its own scope first, and if it is not there, then in the outer scope. So it's not like that JavaScript will first try to find it in the global scope. No, it's not like this. JavaScript will always try to find out in its local scope first, then it will extend its scope or its reach and will try to find out the variable and function outside their scope. Okay, so in this case, when I'm doing console.log and I'll use the last name, so last name, JavaScript engine will try to find out the last name in this block. Okay, so in this case I'll get sing in the output, and if I comment this last name here, so JavaScript engine will try to find out the last name in its outer scope because it's not there in this scope and it's there in the function. So it will pick the last name from the function scope, that is Alice, and I'll get Uday and Alice in the output. If I comment this out here, JavaScript will first try to find out the last name in its own scope, that is the block scope here. No, it's not there. Then in the function scope, no, it's not there. Then in the global scope, yeah, it's there. So I'll get Uday and block. Okay, so this is scope chain in JavaScript. So if JavaScript engine does not find the variable in its local scope, it tries to check for the variable in the outer scope. If the variable does not exist in the outer scope, it tries to find the variable in the global scope, and that's how the scope chain works. Okay, so the next one is explain closures in JavaScript. So closures in JavaScript is an ability of a function to remember the variables and functions that are declared in its outer scope. So for an example, I'll say function myfunc, and no parameters I need this time, and I'll declare an object here, my obj first name Uday and channel name weekly tech, and I declare another function here which will I return function. I don't need a parameter, and I'll say console log my obj dot channel name is awesome. Okay, and when I call myfunc, just like the way we saw it in function curring, when I call myfunc, I'll get a function in return which is this function. Okay, this function. Okay, print message. I need to declare a variable, let print message equal to call myfunc. Okay, so print message will hold this returned function, and when I call print message, this function will be executed and I'll get weekly tech is awesome. And the ability of accessing my object, which is declared outside this function which is highlighted, is closure. Okay, so if you see, my object is not declared in this function, and when I call myfunc, this function will be returned, and when this function is returned, it still holds the value of my obj dot channel name, which is not even declared here. This myfunc function, instead of destroying the value of my obj after execution, it saves the value in the memory for further reference. And this is the reason the returning function is able to use the variable declared in the outer scope even after the function is already executed. And this ability of a function to store a variable for further reference even after it is executed is called closure. And one of the most classical example of closure is to have a private counter. So I'll show it to you how closures are very beneficial in JavaScript. I declare a function private counter, no parameter. Okay, and I'll say I have return a function which will say increment, nothing is here. Okay, and I'll have counter plus plus, and let me declare a counter, let counter equal to 0. I'll give an initial value to it. So instead of returning it like this, I'll return an object, and inside that object I'll have different functions defined, and no parameters this time I need. Okay, and I'll do a counter plus plus here. So this is the first function where we will increment the counter and then decrement, and there we will decrease the counter by 1 to minus minus, and then we'll have another function which will simply say show value of the counter, and it will do a console log of the counter value. Okay, so when I call, and let's have a parameter here which will say initial value, and the initial value will be, let's say, will be equal to the initial value which is passed in the argument. So now let me call this function and hold the value in a that counter of 10. Okay, and I'll give an initial value of 10 to it. So this counter 10 will hold this returned object. Okay, and in this object I have three functions: increment, decrement, and show value. So when I do a counter dot show value like this, I'll get a 10 in the output because the initial value is set like 10 here. Okay, so when I do a increment 2 times, and so we are doing an increment 2 times, so we'll get 12 in the output because we are incrementing it 2 times. And if I increment it 2 times and decrement it 1 time, I'll get an increment of here 1, so 11, then 12, and then a decrement of 1, then again 11. So I'll get 11 in the output, and indeed it's the correct value. Okay, so still it is keeping the value in the memory whatever we are incrementing and decrementing of this counter variable. So this is closure for you, and you can create different counters like this. So the memory will be separate for all the closures like this. You can create n number of counters like this, and you can call it like this. Okay, counter 20. Okay, so you'll get the desired output. So 20 increment by 1, then increment by 1, and if I comment this decrement, so I'll get 22 in the output here for this, and indeed it's the correct output. And the same is in the case of the counter which is created by using an initial value of 30. Okay, so this is closures for you guys, and I have created a separate video and I have explained the different use cases of closures there. The link is there in the description. So let's move on to our next question, which is what are object prototypes? So to explain prototype, let me comment out the closures example first. Okay, so prototype, so all JavaScript objects inherit properties from a prototype. Okay, so prototype is nothing but a blueprint of the object. Okay, so the date object inherits properties from the date prototype, and the math object inherit properties from the math prototype, and array objects inherit properties from the array prototype. Top of the chain there is object.prototype. So every prototype inherits properties and methods from object.prototype. So every object in JavaScript inherits the properties and methods from object.prototype. Okay, and a prototype is a blueprint of an object, and prototype allows us to use properties and methods of an object even if the properties and method are not defined or does not even exist in the current object. For an example, if I do let arr1 equal to an empty array, and if I do arr1 dot push value 1, if I console log arr1, I'll get one element in the array, that is 1 that we just pushed. Okay, so this push method is not declared in arr1, but we can access it because arr1 is an array and its prototype, that is the array constructor, the push method is defined inside that constructor. So if you open this, you can see a prototype here, this property, and inside this property you can find all the methods. Okay, so the prototype of this arr1 is the array object. Okay, so whenever the property or the method is not found on the current object, JavaScript engine will always try to look in the prototype, and if it is still not exist, it will look inside the prototype, and it will end at null. So this is prototype for you, and again I have created a detailed video on this. You can check the link in the description. Let me comment this out and let's move on to our next question, that is, what are callbacks? So callback is a function that will be executed after another function is executed. Okay, so in JavaScript, functions are treated as first class functions or first class citizens. They can be used as an argument of another function, and they can be returned by another function and can be used as a property of an object. So functions that are used as an argument to another functions are called callback. Again, let me repeat, functions that are used as an argument to another function are called callback functions. For an example, if I have function myfunc again, and I'll receive an argument here like fn, and if I call, let's say, console log inside myfunc, and then I'll do a fn of 2, 3, and let me declare another function multiply, and have a comma b here, and I'll return a into b. Okay, and I can use myfunc and I'll call multiply by using myfunc here. Okay, so I can pass multiply as an argument to myfunc, and then myfunc will execute the multiply function for us. So multiply is a callback of myfunc function. Okay, so I'll get inside myfunc and I will console out here instead of returning, and there you are, you'll get the correct output 6 here. So 2 into 3 is 6 that we are calling here. Okay, so multiply is the callback of myfunc function. So this is a callback, a simple explanation of callback: a function which is getting called by another function, a function which is getting called by another function, and that function which is getting called by another function is the callback. Okay, so functions that are used as an argument to another functions are called callback functions. So let's move on to our next question, that is, what is recursion in a programming language? Okay, so recursion is a concept which is related to every programming language. It is not specific to JavaScript. So a recursion is a technique to iterate over an operation by having a function call itself repeatedly until it arrives at a result. So let me quickly create a program, a factorial program for you. So function factorial, and it will take a number, and if I say if number is greater than or equal to 1, I will return num, and I'll call factorial again with num minus 1. Okay, so if it is surprising you and you are getting confused, then please wait, stick to the video, I'll explain it, and else I'll return 1. Okay, so if I return 1, console log factorial, and I want to have factorial of 3. Okay, so factorial is nothing but when you pass 3, so it will give you 3 into 2 into 1. Okay, so this will be 6. In case of 5, you will get 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. Okay, so that will be 120. So that is factorial for you. So every time, so factorial is nothing but multiplying the number with 1 less than the number till it reach 1. Okay, so 5 minus 1 4, 4 minus 1 3, 3 minus 1 2, 2 minus 1 1. Okay, multiply all of them, so the result will be 120. So in this case, if I do a factorial of 3, I should get 6 in the output, and indeed I get. And if I do a factorial of 5, I'll get 120 in the output. Okay, so how it is working? So when I do 3 here, so 3 will come first here, 3 num will have 3, and if this if condition will check whether 3 is greater than or equal to 1, so it will come here 3 into, again the factorial function will be called now with 3 minus 1, that is 2. So till now we have 3 into the factorial call with 2. Okay, so when again this factorial will be called 2. Okay, so if 2 is greater than equal to 1, yes, 2 is greater than equal to 1, then have 2 into, so 2 into factorial of 2 minus 1, that is 1. Okay, so till now we had 3 and now we have 2 here, so 3 into 2 multiplied with factorial of 2 minus 1, that is 1. So is num is greater than or equal to 1? Yes, num is now 1 and which is equal to 1. So return num, that is 1 here, multiplied by factorial 1 minus 1, that is 0. So again factorial will be called and this time the num will be 0. It will reach here if 0 is greater than equal to 1. No, it's not, so it will go inside else and it will return 1. And that's the end of this recursion, and you will get 3 into 2 into 1, that is 6 in the output. And this is how recursion works. Okay, I hope it's clear now, and if it is not, then please let me know in the comment section. We'll discuss more over there. So if I pass 10 here, so I'll get 362,800 in the output, that is the factorial of 10. And let me Google it for you, that is 362,800, and that's what we get in the output, 362,800. Okay, so our code is working perfectly fine. So let's move on to our next question, that is, what is the use of a constructor function in JavaScript? So constructor functions are used to create objects in JavaScript. If you want to create multiple objects having similar properties and method, constructor functions are used. Please note the name of a constructor function should always be written in a Pascal notation, that is, every word should start with a capital letter. Okay, so let me explain it with an example quickly. I'll say person, and the parameters will be name and age and gender also. Okay, so I'll do this dot name equal to name, this dot age equal to age, and this dot gender equal to gender, and this is it. We have a constructor here, and I'll do a let Uday details equal to new person, new person. Let me scroll a bit down, and here I'll pass Uday as a name, 30 as the age, and male as a gender. Okay, and if I'll console log Uday details, I should get an object with the desired properties and the value of the properties, that's the key value pair, and indeed we get the desired object as name as Uday, age as 30, and gender as male. Okay, so constructor is used to create objects in JavaScript. So if you want to create multiple objects having the similar properties, you can use a constructor function. Now let's come to our next question, that is, what is DOM? Or DOM stands for Document Object Model. So DOM is a programming interface of or for HTML and XML documents. So whenever the browser tries to render a HTML document, it creates an object based on the HTML document called DOM. Using this DOM, we can manipulate or change various elements inside the HTML document. As this is an interview questions video, I'm not getting in depth in that, but if you want me to, then please let me know in the comment section. Let's move on to our next question, that is, what are arrow functions? It's a new way of declaring or we have a shorter syntax for declaring functions. So let's compare arrow functions with normal functions. So arrow functions, the main difference between arrow function and a normal function is, in arrow functions they don't have their own scope, they share the lexical scope, which is the scope just outside the arrow function, that is, we say lexical scope. Okay, and to explain that, let me quickly create a object, my obj, and I have a first name like Uday, and I will declare a function print name normal function. Okay, and I'll say console.log this dot first name. Okay, then I'll declare another function print name arrow. We have a comma here, and this will be an arrow function, and I'll do a console log this dot first name. Okay, so one by one we'll call both of them. So as we all know, a normal function call in non-strict mode, this will refer to the global object, that is a window object, and if the function is getting called by an object, then this keyword will have the values and the properties of the object which is calling the function. In our case, we are calling the print name normal by using my obj Uday in the output, that is the first name. But if we'll call print name arrow, then this won't work. We'll get an undefined, because as we have discussed, arrow function does not have its own this value. We normally think that when we call an object, it will bind the this value of the object which is calling it, but this is not the case with the arrow function. The arrow function will share the this value of its lexical scope. So in this case, it is the global scope. So in our case, the global scope is the window object. So if I'll create a window dot first name like Alice, so now it gave us undefined because the window dot first name is not defined. So when we define window dot first name, it will give us Alice in the output. Because print name arrow is an arrow function. Arrow function does not have its own this value, and it does not even bind with the object which is calling it. It will always fetch and get the this value from its lexical scope. In our case, the lexical scope is the global scope, and the global scope is the window object. So when we declared a window dot first name like this, our print name arrow was able to find this dot first name in the window object, because this is here referring to the window object. And let me print out this here to give us, to prove what I am saying, and this here also. Okay, so in this case, in the first case, this normal function call print name normal, it is pointing to the object itself. In our case, the arrow function is pointing to the window object. Okay, so the this keyword inside an arrow function does not refer to the object calling it. It rather inherits its value from the parent scope, which is the window object in our case. Again, I have created a detailed video. If you want, please check the link in the description. You will get an in-depth idea of arrow functions versus normal function. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. What is rest parameters and spread operator? So both rest parameter and spread operators were introduced in ES6. So rest parameter, it provides an improved way of handling parameters of a function. Using the rest parameter syntax, we can create functions that can take a variable number of arguments. It also helps in extracting all or some part of the argument. Rest parameter can be used by applying 3 dots before the parameters. So let me explain it to you with an example. So this time I'll use an arrow function. Let print names, and I will have name 1, name 2, name 3, like this. Okay, and I will simply print the names name okay, and I call print names with Uday, Alice, and Bob. I'll get the output Uday, Alice, and Bob in the console. So don't you think it's a very weird and lengthy way of declaring a lot of arguments in the function? So instead of doing this, we can use the rest parameters. Okay, so rest parameters, as I said, can be used So rest parameter, as I said, can be used to extract all or some part of the arguments. So first we'll check all arguments. Okay, so if we can extract all the arguments in this way, we can do a dot dot dot, three dots at the starting, and say all names. Okay, so in this case all names will be an array, and you can loop over this array to print all the names. Console, and I'll iterate over log all names like this. Okay, and I'll get Alice, Uday, Alice, and Bob in the output, and that's what we are passing in the parameters. We can extract the parameters in a single variable like this. So in this case, this is a rest parameter. These three dots are behaving as a rest parameter. So rest parameters can be used to access all or some of the arguments. In this case, we are extracting all the arguments in a single variable, all names, and this will be an array, and we are iterating over the array to check all the arguments. And we can also use rest parameters to extract few of the arguments. This like this, we can say name1. So here we want Uday to be part of name1 variable, but rest of the parameters I want to be part of all names. So we can print name1 like this. So name1 will be Uday, and rest of them will be Alice and Bob. Okay, but please note, so rest parameter will always be used at the end. It can't be used in the starting and in the middle. Just like if I change name1 from here to, I can't do this. Okay, I'll get error in the output. So rest parameters must be the last formal parameter. Okay, so rest parameters must be the last formal parameter. So the next one is spread operator. So as the name says, spread operator is used to spread the content or the elements of an array or of an object. Let's have an array here. Let names, the array name will be names. Inside that I'll have elements, these elements. Okay, so for now let me comment out this print name call, and I'll use the spread operator to spread the content of the array. So I'll console log, and I'll say dot 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 names. Okay, so this will spread the content of the names array, and I'll get, okay, so I need to correct this one first. This should be at the starting as we have discussed. Okay, now it should work, and we'll get Uday, Alice, Bob. By this console here, it is spreading the content of the names array. So now let's use print name, and let's pass the parameters by using the spread operator like this. Okay, so names, so here these three dots are spreading the content of the names array. So these three dots are acting as a spread operator, and here we want the rest of the parameters into all names. So these three dots are behaving as a rest operator. Okay, so the key difference between the rest parameter and spread operators are, rest parameter is used to take a variable of arguments and turn it into an array, while the spread operator takes an array or an object and spread it. Rest parameter is used in function declaration, whereas the spread operator is used in function call. So we are spreading the names array here. So Uday will be the part of the name1, and rest of the elements will be the part of the rest parameter, that is all name, and we'll get this console log here, and Uday, Alice, and Bob from this console and this console here. Okay, so I hope it is clear. If it is not, then again I have created a separate video on spread operator versus rest parameters. You can check out the video, the link is there in the description. Let's comment out this code snippet and move on to our next question, that is, what is object destructuring in JavaScript? So object destructuring is a new way of extracting the elements from an object or an array. So for an example, let me have an object my obj, and there I will have first name like Uday and last name, and by using object destructuring I can extract a particular element from an array or from an object. I can console first name here, and I'll get undefined because, okay, the name is not matching. It should match. and now you'll get Uday in the output. Okay, so this name should match exactly with the property of the key of the object, and you can also change the name by using a colon and say local name, and now the local name will have the value Uday. Okay, this is object destructuring for you. So there are n number of ways to extract keys or properties from object, and this is a new way of doing it. It is plain and simple and very effective. Again, I have created a separate video on this, objects destructuring and array destructuring. Please check the link in the description. So let me give you an idea of array destructuring also. So for that, let me have an array. I'll use the same array here, names. Okay, and then I'll destructure, let first name. So the first name here will hold Uday because it is index based, and we are accessing and we are trying to extract the first index. So the first index value will be extracted in the first name variable, and it will give Uday in the output. And if you want to skip any element, you can use commas. So comma and comma. So now you have skipped the first and the second element, and now first name should hold Bob. Okay, so this is array destructuring for you. Okay, so the next question is temporal dead zone. So to understand temporal dead zone, we should know hoisting first, and hoisting was our first question. We have seen a lot of examples of hoisting in our first question, and we know that hoisting is variables and functions were declared on top of their scope. We have seen hoisting by using the var keyword. Hoisting is there for all the three variable types, but in case of let and const, they are moved. Once they are hoisted, they are moved to a temporal dead zone. We call it TDZ. So once they are declared, JavaScript engine will move them from TDZ to the call stack. Okay, so temporal dead zone is a behavior that occurs with variables declared using let and const keyword. So that's it with the theoretical questions. I have covered a lot of theoretical questions, and I try to explain them with practical examples. Now let's move on to our next section, where an interviewer can give you a code snippet and can ask you what will be the output of this code snippet. And in most of the case, it will ask you to code something. It will give you the requirement. So the first question of this section is this code snippet gets the output of this code. So let me copy it and paste it in our VS Code. So here we have a function. Let's try to debug it. We have a function func1. Inside this we have set timeout, and we have a console log of x and y. So x is 2 and y is 12. Okay, this is an asynchronous call. So JavaScript will execute this x and y first, and then will execute this timer. So x is declared by using var keyword, and y is declared using let keyword. So we have a set timeout declared inside this. So set timeout is an asynchronous call. So JavaScript engine will execute this code snippet first in the call stack, and then execute the callback of the set timeout once the timer is done. So before the timer is done, our x and y will be declared. The timer will be expired after 3 seconds, and the callback will be executed by the event loop in the call stack. So I think we'll have 2 and 12 in the output. Let's check. Oh, we need to call the function. And indeed, after 3 seconds, we'll get 2 and 12 in the output. So most of the candidates gets confused here. So x and y were declared after the set timeout, and as x is declared by using var. So var keywords are hoisted. So we'll get undefined for case of x, and an error in case of y. But no, it's not like this. JavaScript, this set timeout is an asynchronous call. So JavaScript will put it in a JavaScript will give it to the worker thread, and the worker thread will check for the timeout. And once the timeout is done, and before that, JavaScript will execute this code snippet line number 254 and 255 on the call stack. And once the timer is done, the JavaScript engine will execute, or the event loop will execute this callback on the call stack, and will fetch the x and y value and give you 2 and 12. Okay, so let's move on to our next question, that is what gets the output of this code snippet. So let me paste it here. Okay, this is a very classical example or a question. It was asked in Google. We have a set timeout inside a for loop which is running from 0 till 3. 3 is not included, so 0, 1 and 2, and in this case we are simply printing the value of I. So most of the people will think you will get 0, 1 and 2, but it's not like this. You will get 3, 3, 3 in the output. Yeah, 3, 3, 3, 3 times. This is because var is function scoped. If you change var with let is block scope, and you get correct output 0, 1 and 2 like this. Okay, so if you want more detailed explanation in this, I have covered this particular question in a separate video. The link is there in the description. Please check that out. Okay, so now let's move on to our next question, that is I have a set timeout which is getting timeout after 2 seconds. Then I have a console log 2. Then I have a set timeout of 0, and then I have a console log of 4. So set timeout is a asynchronous call. So first this console log will get executed, and then this console log, and then the set timeout of the timer which is having a 0 value, that is 3, will be executed, and then in the last the set timeout which is having a value of 2 second as expiration will be executed. So you'll get 2, 4, 3 and then 1 in the output. Let's check. 2, 4, 3, after 2 seconds 1 in the output. So now let's move on to our next question, that is guess the output of this code snippet. Let me just copy and paste it here in our VS Code. Let's try to debug it. So we have, okay, this is related with type coercion and type conversion. We have checked and seen type conversion and type coercion in our previous questions in the theoretical section. So plus operator will convert it into a string. So 1 plus 1 will be 1, 1. So a minus 1 will give you not a number because a is a string, and minus operator will coerce it in a number. So a minus 1 is not a number, and then plus operator will coerce it in a string. So 2 minus 3, 2, will get 2 minus 3, 2 in the output. So let's check the output. Let's call my func. Okay, so you'll get 11 and then not a number, then 2 minus 3, 2, and here again hello minus world. So this minus operator will coerce it as a number, so it is not a number. So nan, the type of nan is a number. So number plus number, 100 is a number, will be a number, but nan plus 100 will again nan. Okay, now hello is in string, plus operator will coerce it into string type, and 1558 is again in string, so you'll get hello 1558 in the string. Okay, now let's move on to our next question, that is guess the output of this. So we have where x equal to 23 and ify declared here, and inside we have another ify defined, and inside this ify I have a console log of x, and then I'm doing where x equal to 21. So in the beginning of the video when we had a question about ify, I asked you to keep certain things in mind. One of them was related with ifys plus hoisting. So in this case this random function is function scoped, and the x is declared inside this function and it will be hoisted, but the value will be assigned after this console log. So in this case the x will have a value of undefined, and when we are doing undefined plus plus you will get a console log of not a number. Okay, so in this case you will get not a number. So if you remove x from here, now you'll get undefined in the out. Random function is function scoped, and in this scope x is declared but will be hoisted, but the value is assigned after the console log, so you will get undefined in the output. But instead if you replace var with let, you will get type error in the output, that x is not defined and you cannot access x before the initialization. Okay, now let me remove this x also from here. Let me keep it like this, and now you'll get undefined, and let me remove this x from here. Now what do you think, what will be the output? In this case you'll get 43 in the output, and if you will comment out this 23 in the output, guess the output of this code snippet. So let me copy and paste it here in our VS Code. Hero, so okay, so we have an object here, hero and power level, and then we have a function defined get power, and then we are extracting the get power function from the hero object inside the get power. So get power will again be a function, and this function is nothing but this function. And then we have a hero2 object. Inside this we have a power level of 42. Now we are calling get power. So get power will again be a function, and is a normal function call. We are not calling get power by using any object, so this value will be the global object. It's a normal function call. We are not calling it by using any object, so this will point to the global object, that's the window object. And inside window object we don't have any property or key defined named power level, so this will definitely give you undefined. And in the case of second console log, we have used apply method to bind this value to the hero2 object. In this case you will get 42 in the output. So let's check. Indeed, undefined and 42. Now let's comment out this console and let's move on to our next question, that is this code snippet. Guess the output again. Okay, so we have a function a. Inside that we are consoling this keyword first, and then we have a function, or not a function, an object b, and inside b we have a function func1, which is doing nothing but consoling this value. Then we have again a object c, which is again printing this value. Now we are calling b.func1 and c.func2. so in this case it's a normal function call, non-strict mode, so this will refer to the window object. So in this case this console will print the window object, and in this case we are calling b.func1. so b.func1 we are calling func1 with the b object. So in this case this will print the b object. So in this case c.func2, it will again point to the c object, but func2 is an arrow function, so this won't bind to the c object. It will, so the arrow function does not have its own this value, and it will not even bind with the object which is calling it. It will this value will be the lexical scope. In this case the lexical scope is this function a. So let's move again. So a will call a, so this will give us the window object, normal function call window object. In this case b.func1 is a normal function, so it will be bind with the b object because we are calling func1 by using b.func1. so b is a object here, and in this case this is an arrow function c.func2, so it won't bind with the c object, it will bind to the global object. So let's check the output. So the first one will give us the window object, correct. The second one is the function, that's the b object itself, and the third one is the window object. Okay, so you might be confused that we have defined c object inside the function a, and now it's an arrow function func2, so it will share the lexical scope. So is it sharing the lexical scope of, or is it sharing the scope of the function a? So let's check that out. Okay, so let's call a dot apply, and before that let me comment out this, and let me declare let obj equal to a simple object like 20. Okay, so now we'll apply, we'll bind a functions this value to this obj object, and now let's check the output. Okay, so apply will bind the function with this argument that has been passed in the argument. So in this case this argument is the object obj. This console will print the object itself because it has been bind by using the apply method. And again, and a normal function call func1, b.func1 normal function call, so this will bind to the object which is calling it. So in this case again the b object, and here the arrow function. So arrow function does not have its own this value, it will be the lexical scope, and in this case the lexical scope is the function scope of the a function, and it will share this value of the a function, and in this case so c.func2 will give us the object obj itself. So let me uncomment this call also. So in this case we are normally calling it, simply calling it normal function call. In this case this will be window, this call will give us the b object, and this will be the lexical scope. It's an arrow function, so the lexical scope is the function scope of the function a, and the function a is holding the window object, so it will give us the window object in the output. So again, window object function, and this func2 will give us the window object. When we binded the function a with the object obj, so we'll get the object in the output. Again, the normal function call, it will be the object itself, and in this case the lexical scope of the function a. Okay, cool, isn't it? So let me uncomment, so let me comment out the call, so we have a clear console. Let me move on to our next, guess the output again. Let me copy it here, let me copy and paste it down here. So f is getting called by b, so this will point out to the object which is calling the function. So in this case f is getting called by the object itself. So for now just focus on this. So it is getting called by b, so this keyword will refer to the object b. So in this case this dot name will be Uday, and now we have an ify. So ify in this case will point to the global object. It will be, so this will be the global object. So in this case this dot name, so name in the global object window object name is defined. So for now let me just remove name here, because otherwise we'll get a blank in the output. So we'll check that this value and self dot name, it's a function scoped. So in this case self will be in action, so self dot name, so self will hold the b object and will get self dot name as Uday. So you'll get in this case you will get Uday, in this case you will get the window object, and in this case you will get Uday. Let's check the output. Indeed, so you'll get Uday and then the window object and then Uday. Okay, so the next one is implement a function that returns an updated array with right rotations on an array of integers. So given the following array 2 3 4 5 7, we'll perform 3 right rotations. So the first rotation will be like 7 2. Okay, so we want to pop the last element and then we'll insert at the first position like this 5. Okay, so let's code it out. So for that let's create a simple function, let rotate array, and then we'll have an array and the number of times I want to rotate, and inside that we'll have an if condition first, and whether if num is equal to 0, then simply return the array, and if it is not, then let's have a for loop, and that for loop the array will be the ARR array that is coming in the input argument. And let's have our logic here. So first we want to pop element, so ARR dot pop the element, so it will remove the last element from the array, and then we will simply want to insert it at the first position. So I'll return the new array ARR dot, we'll use unshift to insert at the first position. So to insert at first position or from the starting of the array, you'll use unshift, and to insert at the last you'll use push. Okay, so unshift and then the element itself. Okay, so we can do it like this also. Instead of the element declaration, we would have simple do it like this and remove it here. Okay, so ARR dot unshift will insert it from the beginning, the starting of the array. ARR will pop it out from the end and will insert it here. Okay, so let's have our array. So let's copy the array from here. So let's call the function rotate array and pass the array, and then the rotation will be for 3 times. Okay, and the output should be 4 5 7 2 3. Okay, so I think we need to console it. Console the execution of function, and now let's check the output. Okay, so unshift will return the length of the new arrays, but we don't want the length, we need the array, so we should return array here. It was a mistake from my side, I'm sorry for that. Now I think it should work. Okay, and we got the same array in the output. Why? Oh, okay, my mistake, I'm sorry for that. We should not run the loop for the whole array, we should run it for the number of times we want to rotate it. Okay, so the index will be 0 and it should not be with the length of the array, it should be till the num itself. Okay, so like this, I hope it should work now. We'll get 4 5 7 2 3 in output. Okay, so the loop will run for 3 times, and for the first time we will pop 7 and we'll insert it at the beginning, at the starting of the array. Okay, so this is 3 rotations. So now let's move on to our next question, that is, given an array, reverse each word in the sentence. So let's take the string and we want to reverse it out. Okay, so here we will going to use a lot of string methods, and that I have covered separately in a different video, most used string methods. You can check that out. So for now, let's have this string and we want to reverse it. So for reverse, we first need to split it. So I'll console log directly. So my string dot, I'll split it based on space, and split will return a new array, and I'll reverse the array by using the reverse method of array, and then I'll join the array by using the join method, and I'll join the elements by a space. So I'll get weekly tech to welcome. Okay, so the whole string is reversed. And if you want to reverse the words also, so you can split it without the space and join it without the space. Now it will reverse word also and get this in the output. Okay, so each of the word in the string is reversed and the string is also reversed. Okay, so now let's move on to our next question, that is how to empty an array in JavaScript. So the most easy way to do it is change the length. So I'll console the array. Okay, now I should get the array itself in the output. Okay, it's working fine, and I'll simply make the length equal to 0. So now I'll get an empty array in the output. We can do here, we can again assign it to a new array like this, and in this case also we'll get an empty array. So coming to our next question, how to duplicate. Okay, so let's copy out the array itself, or even you can use this array list, and you can use the concat method, array list dot concat, with the same array, and we'll get the copied element inside the array. Okay, so duplicate elements. Now let's move on to our next question, that is how to do let add 6 create base 6, and then 6 will return 16 and 21 will return 27. Okay, so this is a classical question of closures. We'll do it. So first we need to create a function create base. So let create base equal to, it will take a base num, that is in our case will be 6, and it will return a new function which will take add num, that is the number to add, and it will simply add and return base num with the add num. And then we can do let add 6 equal to create base with 6, and then we'll call add 6 with 10 and add 6 with 21, So this will give you 16 and 27 in the output. So as it is an arrow function and we have only one line here, you can remove this return like this. You don't need this parenthesis also, it's only one line. And same is in the case with this return, you have only one line. You can remove this parenthesis also, and we'll save it, and now it will work for you. Now let's move on to our next question, that is, given two string, return true if they are anagrams of each other. So let's say if we have a word Mary and a second word army, so are they anagrams of each other? So let's copy out our two variables and paste it here, and let me just comment out this console. So let's create a function, let is anagram, and I'll pass first word, then the second word. Inside that I'll first convert them to a lowercase. So for that, let me have a variable lower first, and this will be first word dot to lower case, and the second will be let lower second equal to second word dot to lowercase. Now both of them are in lowercase, and now I will split it out without any space. So I'll have a array. So lower first will be an array, and let me call is anagram with the first word and the second word. And there you are. Okay, so we have an array which should be in lower case. Okay, I have split the first word, but I should split the lower first. Now it should give us the correct output. And now we'll sort this array. Then after sorting, we will join it, and then we'll have a sorted string in the output. And the same we will do with the second word, and we'll console the second word. Okay, and now we will simply return whether the first word is equal to the lower second, whether the lower first is equal to lower second. Okay, if it is, then it is true, otherwise then it is false. So if it is true, then it's an anagram. If it is false, then it's not an anagram. Okay, so I'll console log the output. Should remove this now too. Okay, because Mary and Army is an anagram. So if I remove Army from here and I put Uday, so it should give us a false, because both of them are not anagram of each other. So that's it, folks. I tried to cover a lot of interview questions, theoretical, practical, and I explained you, I think, in detail for most of the theoretical questions and some practicals also. Please let me know in the comment section if you have any doubt, any query, any suggestion. Please let me know in the comment section if you have anything to discuss. Everything is appreciable, guys, and please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. It gives me a lot of confidence to make such kind of videos. Please, guys, thanks a lot.